I'm excited for both of you. What a fun journey.
So
Yeah.
fun. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Montana Multipreneurs. We're your co hosts, Nina Lund, owner of Next Generation HR, and Mac, my co host, owner of Maven Administrative Consulting. We're thrilled today to have our special guest, Joan Hibdon, owner of JDH Insights and the author of The Leader's Guide to Mastering Feedback. Joan, welcome today. We're so happy to have you.
Such a gift to be here. And I'm so thrilled that you invited me to be here today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We're really looking forward to it. Joan will be sharing with us a number of things. There's so many multifaceted, and we're just so happy. As I was planning for this, I was like, okay, which way do we want to slice and dice this? But I think a few things just at the top. We'll be talking about how Joan works with leaders to strengthen their communication and growth overall. We're really excited to have her talk about her book related to feedback, ongoing feedback, the importance of it, and how that feeds into effectiveness for not only leaders, but organizations and just life in general. So, Joan, tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about yourself, if you don't mind, and then we'll share some of the history about how we know each other as well. But just to
No,
begin with, if you don't mind.
I don't mind a bit. So a little bit about myself. I am a Colorado native, and that's a little bit of, we'll tie that into how we know each other. We met each other in Colorado. I live in Arizona now. We moved to Arizona about 11 years ago after my husband declared that he couldn't live in the snow anymore. He doesn't mind visiting it, but living in it was just he's not a fan of it. And so I'm married. I live in Arizona. I have two adult daughters, and that's on the personal side. I usually always lead with business. So this is kind of fun to do the personal side first. And it could be because we're recording this during the holiday season. From a business standpoint, I started out my formal career in the field of human resources. There is something about human beings that I just love. I'm obsessed with humans. I'm, crazy about how messy we are, how complex we are, how gifted, how unique, all of it. And so human beings fascinate me. And I just feel incredibly blessed to have spent the majority of my career in human resources, working with humans in all facets of the human resource space. In about 2010 or so, my career took a little bit of a pivot in an organization where I started to lead the learning and development team. And so I became very entrenched in learning and development. Not that I was doing it, but I was leading all the people who were, whether it was sales or technology or communications process, you name it. And in that, I was introduced then to this whole facet of leadership and leadership coaching. And it was through that I found, kind of quite accidentally, my next career love, which is working with leaders specifically, because we all know those leaders that we love to work for and the ones we don't love to work for. And
Yes.
so I was working with a woman who introduced me to this whole concept of leadership coaching, and I was hooked. And really, that's where I wanted to spend the next part of my career. So after going through several acquisitions, I ended up being on my own and starting my consulting business about 8 years ago, and have not looked back. I enjoy everything that I do and working with different organizations and helping to promote, as you had said, leaders and help to cultivate leadership excellence. And I say that I love doing that because I want employees to have extraordinary experiences at work. We spend way too much time at work, and our leaders need to be the ones that help us grow and thrive and all of that. So I'm pretty passionate about it.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about your leadership journey to start with in general and moving into your own consulting business. 8 years, I didn't realize. I mean, that's not all that long ago, really. I guess I
Not
thought.
all that long ago.
And so your JDH Insights, that's the leadership consulting company that you started? Okay.
That's exactly
And
right.
okay. And that organization then, do you facilitate leadership development sessions, programs? Is it one-on-one coaching? Is it all of the above?
Yes. So
Okay.
where I spend my time and my days, and I love what I do because it's very diverse. So I spend my days either doing one-on-one coaching, and or I may spend my days doing leadership development with organizations and teams of leaders. I'm certified in several different assessments: Enneagram, DISC, MBTI, EQI, the emotional intelligence. So I've got several certifications. So what I will also do is either leverage those assessments in leadership development, whether one-on-one coaching or in coaching teams of leaders or developing teams of leaders. And or I'll also do it for team building purposes with people who have employees who perhaps need to advance their overall team dynamics or something like that. So I'll do a lot of team building as well. So those three different areas are where I spend most of my days.
Interesting. And you wrote your book. Talk a little bit about the impetus of that, why you decided to write the book, what the process was like for
Mm,
you. And then we'll talk a little bit more specifics about the book, because I think when I reached out to you, I said I refer that book to
thank you.
everybody. It's so hands-on, but we can talk a little bit more about what drove you to be an
Thanks.
author.
You know, when I was working with my coach and going through my coaching certification, she asked me what big dreams I had in my life. And writing a book was not necessarily one of them, but I put it out there. I'd like to write a book someday. And she said, interesting, what would it be about? And at the time, I didn't know. But there were two things that drove me to write this specific book. One of them was that I received a book called The Leader's Guide to Mastering Feedback, and I happen to have a copy right here. So I received, when I was in the corporate world, I received the best feedback that I had ever received in my life. And it was at a time where it was being delivered by somebody who I knew really cared about me and really cared about who I was being and cared about my career, and who was courageous enough to give me that feedback directly, clearly, and I'm going to use the word with love. I mean, and it was also at a time where I was ready to hear the feedback. And so his feedback changed my life so much that to this day, I still reach out to him around the anniversary of his giving me this feedback. And that was in 2000, I want to say 13. Still reach out and thank him for changing my life because that feedback literally changed my life. And the feedback was I needed to stop being so effing nice. And he didn't say F, he used the word. And so when he said that, I was like, what do you mean? And he dove into the essence of what he meant by that. And as he was sitting there sharing with me some things that he and other of the executives had seen, I never felt so seen and or so naked at the same time. And after he gave me that feedback and I left his office and shed a couple of tears, I hired my first executive coach. And through that journey, it helped me find who I am today. And so it changed my life. Now, so that was one of the impetuses. The second one is that as I've been in my consulting practice in my business, one of the hardest things that leaders are sharing with me that for them is the hardest thing to do from a communication standpoint is to give feedback to employees. And they don't want to give the feedback because they don't want to hurt their feelings. They don't want to make them mad. They don't want to tell them this truth that they've been holding on to for months and or years about a particular performance issue. So there's a number of leaders out there in really fantastic positions who feel as though they're better off not saying anything for the reasons that I just mentioned to you. But what
Right.
I share with these leaders and a lot of the coaching I was doing early on was around how do I say this thing to this person? And they would unpack this thing. And I would say, the way that you just said it was like perfect. I wouldn't change a thing about how you just said it to me. But they weren't feeling it. It was too stressful for them. So from that, then I decided to write this book. And it was in the later, it was in September of 2020 when I started to write the book. I hired a writing coach, started to outline it. And then just a lot of stories just started to flow through all of my experiences, as both of you know, all of my experiences being in HR. And you can see these missteps where feedback is given and it's given in a harmful way, or feedback isn't given and it doesn't help the person to grow. And they don't know what they're doing or not doing. And sometimes they do know, but they're too afraid to admit it themselves. So it's become a passion project for me. I find feedback fascinating.
Yeah, in the book, you share your journey with feedback
Mhm.
yourself personally, not the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And one thing I've found is a lot of managers or leaders that think, well, I'm not afraid of conflict. They do hold back though, because they use the excuse of, well, I don't want to crush somebody. So I'm just holding it back. Like I'm doing them a favor. And even
Right.
some of the most strong managers and leaders will hold that back.
Right. And you know what's interesting about it, and I want to pick up on something, and this is how I see these connections around feedback so clearly. earlier when we were preparing for this podcast together, one of the things that Mac had asked was, "Oh, can you see me clearly? Or am I a little fuzzy?" She was asking for specific feedback
Right.
in that particular area. Now, would somebody have said that that's what she was doing specifically? Because she didn't say, "Can you give me feedback? Am I fuzzy?" She said, "Can you see me clearly?" Or "Am I fuzzy?" That is that is a form of asking for feedback, and we do it all the time fairly naturally, but we don't realize that it's happening. Feedback is happening around us all of the time, and I think sometimes for leaders and for people who are, receiving it, as soon as we even use the word feedback, it creates this sense of, stress in our body because we feel as though something big is coming our way.
Or
Right.
needs to.
Right, right. Or and sometimes if you can weave feedback into a conversation like, "This is what I'm seeing. Do you mind if I share with you what I'm seeing about your performance or what I'm observing about your performance?" If you take the word feedback out of it, then it just kind of flows. But if somebody steps into, "I'm gonna give you some feedback," then everybody goes,
Right. Well,
And
truly,
it's happening all the time, right? We are talking primarily in an organization type of environment,
yeah,
but it's as solopreneurs, it's with partners, it's with vendors, it's with suppliers. I mean, it's with our spouses and
right. Yeah.
families. I mean, it just exists.
Yeah.
It's
right.
a system.
Yeah. A lot
Especially
of
as
us don't know that.
that's a leader, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure too, you guys know that you have to look inward as well as outwards. So doing both helps with communication delivery and feedback.
Right. Well, and I think that, the looking inward is like, who do I want to be and how do I want to show up with this person? And then the outward is, how do I want to leave this person feeling after I provide the feedback? And I don't know that in the particular case of this person who gave me feedback that changed my life, I'm not sure that he was looking inward. I'm not sure he synthesized those questions I just went through. But what I do know is that he cared enough about me to let me know that I had the proverbial egg on my face, and I wasn't seeing it,
Right.
but he cared enough about me to say, "I see something that you may not see, and you need to know it." And in that case, it was a bit career limiting if I didn't make the change.
And that's interesting because the feedback to me, I wish somebody would say that to me,
Right.
but I was too nice. You took some what would seem like positive feedback in a way, but like you said, it could have been career limiting.
Struggle with that too. I mean, Mina tells me it all the time. You don't be so nice. That's my feedback too.
Yeah, and
So
and and we all have these proclivities or the ways that we are, and most of them come from the time that we're really little. We learn ways of being in the world to protect ourselves and to make sure that we stay safe and or to be seen or to have control or whatever it is. These habits and these reflexes that we develop are developed when we're very young, and we bring them into the world as we grow older and into our leadership roles. And so I think, when I think about doing one-on-one executive coaching, it's a confidential space where I can help somebody unpack these behaviors that they brought from the time that they were 4 or 5 or whatever the age is into their leadership capabilities. And so sometimes being way too nice and or sometimes being way too harsh, right? It all comes from someplace. So that's the inward part that you were talking about, Mac. Like leadership is an inside game.
I have a 5-year-old
Uh,
and I think about it every day, like who is she going to be? And so I hope to build good leadership skills
yeah,
or not build, but just help grow good leadership skills for her in the
sure.
future.
And influence and how you show up every day and things like that. It all comes from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that, so I mentioned, I mean, I'm not saying this lighthearted that I refer the book to people.
Thank you for doing that, by the way. It's important work, whether it's this book or another book on feedback. Feedback is a life skill that we all need to learn how to use better and normalize it.
100%. And you need, just like with anything else, if it doesn't come natural to you, you need to practice it.
Mhm.
And the book does give some very practical hands on tools to do that. And one of the things that I love is that you've got sheets at the end of each
Mm,
chapter, takeaways like, think about this, reflect on this. And so if somebody works through the book, for me, who I also do coaching and leadership, It's very helpful when I'm coaching somebody to take an excerpt out of it and it's a coaching tool for me
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you.
So it's very helpful in that regard. I was, for our audience, Mac and I had some stress around the holidays with power outages where we live in
It's
our
a little
neighborhood.
bit of stress.
Yeah, it set us really behind. So I was in the dark for about a week, literally. So I was looking for my book before we got started. But if you saw it, it's got like all kinds of stickers and tabs. And that's to me a sign of a really good book
Mm.
because I flagged so many things in it. Joan, a question for you on the book writing process. You mentioned that you started in about 2020
Mhm.
and you actually got a writing coach to assist you. And I've heard that from others as well. For people, so I've had lots of discussions with other guests, and they mention, you kind of get your name out there when you write a book, but it's quite a process too. And so what made you get a writing coach? Did your coach recommend a writing coach or?
No, it's a great question. I got a writing coach because I didn't know where to start. And because it's not my background and I didn't graduate with any kind of degree in that field, I had no idea where to start. So I had asked my coach if they knew of anybody to help me get started and understand kind of the process from the beginning to the end and all the in-betweens. And I was also looking for somebody that was somewhat of an accountability person for me because what I knew about myself is that when I get stuck and sometimes too much in my head, then I stall and I get a little bit paralyzed. And I needed somebody who would say, you need to have this much work completed by this date. And that helped me kind of power through the process of writing and framing things out. And so for this particular book, having a writing coach was just really helpful. My husband, while I was going through the process of writing the book, it wasn't a daily thing, but it was certainly on my mind all of the time. And what are the stories I'm going to add and how I'm going to set it up and things of that nature. But I remember my husband, after it was all said and done, he's like, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness we can get finished with this." But because it was like having a whole nother entity living in our home while I was writing, like the need for this silent, invisible thing to move out, once it's published and out on the shelves. And so he swore, he said, I don't ever want you to do this again. And then it was a few weeks ago, he came home and he said, I have the idea for your next book. And I went, what are you talking about? He said, are you going to co-author this with me? But it was fascinating. But I'm glad I did invest in the writing coach piece of it. It helped me quite a bit. And I don't know that I would have had, I know it wouldn't have been as good as it is if I hadn't had that.
Excellent. Couple of other things related to feedback and the topic of the book. And when you and I were chatting, I don't know, a week or so ago, we talked about, so initially I was thinking we would interview you and launch it during the annual performance appraisal.
Mm.
But it didn't work out that way. And as I reflected and Mac and I talked, it's actually better because with feedback, it shouldn't just be an annual thing. It should be
Right.
ongoing. Talk a little bit more about that and keeping it as more of a cycle versus a moment.
I think it's critically important to have it more of a cycle. And to your point, you used this word earlier, practicing it all of the time. So it should be a continuous cycle as opposed to a moment, because if we can make it a continuous cycle, then we start to normalize feedback. And so that you guys probably both agree with this too, when we get to the annual review process, whatever it is that you're going to share with your employee or employees about their performance should not be a surprise. Right. In fact, it should be a culmination of conversations that have occurred over time. And so when you get to the annual performance appraisal, that you're actually celebrating successes and things that you've grown in, and you can reflect back on the feedback and then the growth through that. And then you can also, at that point, if there is more feedback to give about additional development opportunities, it's so normalized that it doesn't feel as though you are being attacked or examined or whatever words you want to use. It's just another conversation. It's the icing on the cake of a big year of performance. And I don't believe in a one and done when it comes to feedback. I think that feedback is a cycle, and it's one of those things where if it's done well, the feedback is given, the feedback is reflected upon, And then after some action has been taken or not taken with the feedback, is to check back in and say, so I made these adjustments. I'm talking to you as my bosses. I made these adjustments. Is this what you wanted? So you can close the full loop, and it just becomes a natural, normalized practice in an organization. And it fits so well into healthy cultures. In fact, I like, there's that performance feedback, but I really am having an appreciation for organizations who are implementing peer-to-peer feedback. So it doesn't have to go employee to manager to employee. So you cut the middleman out of it, and the peer says to the peer, hey, we've been working on this project together, and here's some feedback I want to give you. And it just becomes normalized.
It creates a culture. So I help support executives, and I feel like I create check-ins and syncs for them. So either the people they manage or managers that they oversee can have those checkpoints. Because I think, like you said, it should be way more often, whether it's monthly or
Right.
it has to be more than annually.
Yeah, you're talking about some of those check-ins, whether it's a one-on-one meeting
Right.
or something like that, the syncs and the check-ins. I think that those are brilliant. And I think if managers aren't doing that today, they should implement it right away, because
Right.
it's a way to keep that organic communication open
Yep.
between the manager and the employee, and even, again, peer to peer. It's just such a critical way to communicate.
Right. And whether it's, over a meeting, phone call, email, Slack message, as long as there's a touch point,
Mm-hmm.
like it helps the employee who is going to have that annual performance review start to, work on that portfolio to chat about. It helps the employer,
Right.
manager, whomever. So I agree. I think those more frequent checkpoints are important.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I was just thinking about a young lady who had come out of college, and she had been working with this company for like 5 months, and I'd been in and out of the company, a place where I could go to physically on a pretty frequent basis. And I asked her how things are going. This is your first job out of college, and how's it going? And she said, I really like the work, but I'm really confused because I haven't received any feedback from my manager. And I said, not any feedback? And she said, no, I haven't heard from my manager whether I'm doing a good job or a terrible job. I'm doing the work. And my manager says, thank you, but doesn't ever say, here's what I think you're doing really well. And I said, have you asked your manager for feedback? And she said, no, I thought it was my manager's job just to give me the feedback. I thought that was a natural thing. I thought that was her job. And I
Right.
said, no, if you want the feedback, I would ask for it. She may not be aware that you're missing that.
That's important.
Yeah.
Set the tone of how you want feedback for you to receive feedback. I mean, even just in your day-to-day conversations, ask questions. The more you ask, the more questions people will ask you.
Yeah.
What I've kind of
Great
experienced.
point. Really great point. Excellent.
And then, so in terms of something that leaders can do today, what's one small move they could make to enhance their feedback giving skills or leadership skills? Just a small movement people could jot down right now if they were like, I could be better at that.
The one that comes immediately to mind, and it goes back to what Mac was saying about the check-ins or the syncs and things like that, is to immediately let their team know that they want to get better at feedback, and they want to invite their team to get better at feedback. So it's not a surprise. So that's number one. But to practice it, and a way to practice it in the syncs or the check-ins, is to set up a framework. And I call it the 2x2. I don't think I invented it. I think I learned it from somebody. But it can be one of two things: the invitation to have the employee give you as the boss feedback. So what are two things that I'm doing well that are helping you in your role? And what are two things that I could be doing better? And then reverse it and say to the employee, I'd like to share with you two things that I think that you're doing really well, and two things that you could be doing better or different, right? And you start to balance it out. It's not the cookie approach or the Oreo approach. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not, here's something good, here's something you could work on, and here's something good again, because it gets lost. That here's what you need to work on gets lost. So I have a preference for what you're doing well, what you could be doing better, and just starting to utilize that pretty quickly and normalize it. It's a new year. Why not introduce it now, and just get people used to it and practicing.
Yeah. And Mac had pointed out a little bit earlier the skill of receiving feedback. And I know corporate America and I had many direct reports, I went through an exercise, which was not a feel good exercise. And you have to be prepared for it. But it was kind of similar to what you were mentioning, Joan. It was a start, stop, and kind of do more of. So,
Yeah.
what should I start doing that I'm not doing presently? What stop doing that I'm doing? And the stop doing that I'm doing, sometimes it was a little hurtful, but you had to brace yourself and be open that you're asking the question. Um,
I think sometimes too, in the context of feedback, because it's a human condition, it is hard to say to somebody something that you have no idea how they're going to receive it. You have no idea. But all you can do is be 100% responsible for who you are, how you're showing up, how you're delivering it. You can't be responsible for how they receive it. That's up to them. And I think, Mac, you said something earlier, which is really important, and that is, how do people in your organization like to receive feedback? Some like it in writing, some like it direct and face on, some like to receive the feedback and then process it overnight and then come back for a conversation later. And everybody's very different in how they like to receive it. But I think that whole notion of doing what you can to normalize it is helpful. But what I was going to try to say is that I think for leaders who have not been saying the thing has been going on for months and months, and it's the first time the leader is saying to the employee, "Hey, you've been doing this thing for a while." And the employee is like mortified. Like, if you had shared this with me months ago, I could have corrected it. It's like you're finally telling me the truth, which can be really tricky for the leader to share, and it's hard for the employee. And so I think if that's a case for a leader, it's important for the leader to say, "Hey, I've been thinking about this thing for a while and I haven't shared this with you. That's on me. But here is something that I've been observing, and I want you to know about it so that we can make some, we can do some course corrections now and get this on the straight and narrow, or whatever the words are." I think if the leader can own the fact that they've been holding on to the truth for a while, that's a big sign of vulnerability and may help the employee understand that it took something for the leader to say the thing.
I agree. I mean, being vulnerable is such a hard thing. Personal, professional, it's a hard thing. And so I think some leaders are like, well, I have to spend all of this time focusing on growth and higher strategic priority tasks. Why should I take the time to care about who receives what? And it's like making their life easier also makes your life easier. So if you
100%.
so if you find out how people like to receive feedback and they start doing, they feel better, they start working harder, it's going to make your life better
Yeah.
in
'Cause they're
turn.
gonna be up for more things, and they're
Right.
gonna wanna grow.
Excellent. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about Joan and your entrepreneurship and you. I started the episode saying you're very multifaceted, multi-talented might be the right word for it.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit more. So we talked about your leadership coaching business. We talked about your book and things that go into that. Share a little bit more about, okay, let me put it this way. I'll just say it. You're also very musically inclined. Let's
I am musically inclined. Would I put the word "very" in front of it? I'm not sure I would. I have loved music since I was a child, and I declared to my mother when I was 13 that I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. I had a lot of influences at the time, and, as mothers do, she looked at me and smiled, and she said, "Nice dream, honey. You need to get a real job so that you can pay your rent." And she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong about that. There was a lot of things that happened in my teenage years, which is a whole nother time for a podcast. But I have continued to write music and sing and play guitar and things like that. So I feel very grateful because I have a lot of talents and a lot of creative juices, and I can't sit still. I'm one of those human beings that I've always got to be doing something, either with my mind. I'm a continuous learner. I like to learn a lot of things, and or my hands, or if you were sitting in my office with me right now, you'd see that I have my legs crossed up on my office chair, and just so I'm always thinking about new creative ways of doing things and playing and things like that. Fairly playful as a coach.
that's what I was gonna ask. How does that creativity feed into the leadership coaching?
Mm,
And you talk
yeah.
about this in the book too, about creative leaders.
Oh, yeah, there is a chapter that I do talk about, and it's about wearing different hats and how you are, like, providing feedback. And so I have I have a hat that I wear as a consultant sometimes when I'm working with businesses where it's a little bit of a historian. And so I play the role of a historian, and I can remember things that happened in an organization 6 years ago. And then as I'm coaching a leader, as an example, who is discovering this one new problem or issue, I can go back from a historian standpoint and say, well, you have been talking about this for the past 6 years. And as we are here today, and we've covered a lot of ground over 6 years, what progress have you made with this particular person or employee? And let's look at the history, right? So I can put on the historian hat. Or so creative ideas around that. Other creative ways that I think about when I do coaching, it's helping people understand that it's okay to get out of our heads. Because as leaders, we're often thinking from this part up. Sometimes we need to move our bodies. Sometimes we need to draw pictures. And so when I'm working with my clients one-on-one, I will ask for permission to be playful. And in fact, when we set up our relationship, I have a tendency to be playful when we coach. And are you okay with that? And the client will always ask, well, what does that mean? And my response is, I don't know yet. I don't know until I get to know you a little bit better and you get to know me, but I will always ask permission to be playful before I will be playful and before I, suggest something to you. So it could be as simple as knowing that somebody loves watching the World Series, and I'll pay attention to the World Series, and then I'll pull in the World Series ideas or the plays, to be on the field, and I'll work with my client as though we're both on the field. And there are times when I'll stand up while I'm coaching, and I'll have the client stand up, and and he's swinging and I'm throwing a ball, metaphorical ball, right? But we're working together in a very playful, creative way to hopefully unlock something that hasn't been discovered yet. So I don't know how that lands for you, Nina.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. And you're being modest on the talented musicians. I was sharing uh, with Mac, and I was sharing with Joan when we were talking. Joan wins the award for the person in my professional career we've had on this podcast that I've known the longest.
Yeah.
So 36 years, we figured out.
My gosh.
Uh, 36 years. And
Yeah.
for our audience and for you, Mac, as well, my first job out of college, I was hired for a telecommunications company in HR. And it was, I hate to use the word replace because it really is not possible, but Joan was being promoted and had taken on an assignment at our corporate headquarters, so still within the company. And so my first job out of college was replacing her, and she cross-trained me fantastically. That was
So fun.
year before so we've known each other a long time. And back in those days, so what I say while you're being humble, we went on a ski trip, a few friends and us, that group of people, always a lot of fun, big department, always go along. We went on the ski trip. I won't tell everything, Joan, unless you do. But we were at the lodge, and it was kind of open mic. And Joan got right up. I can remember the song. It was the boardwalk walk.
Yep.
I'm not musically inclined. And she just belted it out a cappella. And I was like, what? So talented. So that's a very fond memory of me. No, we've lost touch over the years, of course, as most people do, but we've reconnected.
I'm so grateful for that. And I am grateful for the memories, because that particular memory, as you started to talk about it, I'm like, I now remember it, but I would not have remembered that on any other ordinary day. But those were really good times. And I remember at that time, I was also playing with two other gentlemen in the telecommunications industry. Both of their names were Jim. And I still stay in touch with one of them. And he still performs all of the time. So it's been fun. I try to get out and perform as much as I can, but business has been so blessed that I'm not performing as much as I used to. So it's been fun.
Great.
So well, I'm glad our paths have crossed and that I got to, meet you.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to when I come to Montana, which is probably going to be in 2026, because I was telling Nina I have a good friend that lives not too far from where you all are. And so I need to make a trip up there and spend some time during the summer, of course.
Yes.
Well, you'll have a few places to stay.
Yeah, it will be great.
Joan, we always ask our guests something fun that you want to share that we haven't talked about. That's just something you do or a fun part of you.
I think if I were to say that there's something that is possibly fun or surprising is that I love Formula One car racing and I
Oh,
watch it. I love the strategy around it. I love the energy, and I've watched it for at least 30 years.
have you
And
gone? Have you gone to
I've gone to several races in Montreal. When they had one in Indianapolis, I've gone to the Austin races. I've never been over to Europe for the races, but that would be fun. I'd love to go to Italy. But yeah, so I love watching Formula One, and so it's been fun. So that's something always surprising. Like, what?
I love
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah,
so
it's fun.
And what's next for you? You mentioned your husband already mentioned book two. Is that in the works or?
So there's one of two things as it relates to a big project like that. There could be a book in the works, and if it were a book, it would either be this topic that my husband mentioned and or a historical fiction book. There's somebody in my life that I would love to dig into some of the letters that she's left behind and do some research around the time period in which it was pretty important for her and potentially write a book, a historical fiction of some sort book. I love reading. And again, to the point I made earlier, I love learning. I'm a continuous learner and I love digging into things. So, Nina, we talked about this a little bit. I am always at work, I'm always creating something. And so my family often will say, my daughters and husband who work too much, or even friends, you're working too much. But for me, I love what I do and I'm creating a lot. So it never feels like work to me. It just feels like one continuous, I don't know,
we
creative
can
place to
relate,
play. Pardon
can't
me?
we? I said we can relate. I think both Nina and I can, so we get it.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
a
fun.
great
It's
way to
fun.
sing.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
no, it's
One
not.
last thing before we leave, Joan, that you've mentioned, and it always interests me. A lot of our guests talk about having coaches, a lot of entrepreneurs, mentors. You referenced it. I recently got a coach. I think I waited too long, and not too long, but I wished I would have done it earlier in terms of
Mm,
an entrepreneurship coach. We talked at one point, they have coaches for the writing, sales, and
right,
marketing. And there's
right.
all avenues there. And I think sometimes people think, well, if you're a coach, shouldn't you know it all or know how to do that? And why do you need a coach? And I just find it so important that people do have some resources to lean on uh, there. So I just wanted to say a note about that. It's inspiring when I
Yeah.
hear even talented people get some support too. You do it all.
And I think as an entrepreneur, one of the things that I've learned for me, I've learned that as an entrepreneur, I need different kinds of support because I'm not working with people in an office or in a corporation where I'm getting continuous, even if it's invisible mentorship. So like for this year, and I'm happy to say this too, for this year, I ended up investing in a sales coach for myself because when I started working and doing what I do, I had a lot of referral business and that was fantastic. But at some point, the referral business doesn't come as fast as it had. And so now I'm changing and building new skills and muscles around the prospecting process, which I find fascinating. I never thought, and in fact, it was my husband when we were first dating that he said to me, he said, I think you'd be a really good salesperson because you're so good at developing and cultivating relationships. I think you'd be fantastic at it. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm in human resources. I'll never do that. But what I have found, one of the things that I do enjoy in my work that I do today is business development and relationship building and things like that. But closing the deal sometimes is tough for me. And so I hired a sales coach to help me get better at that piece. So I think we all can use somebody in different resources. So Nina, I'm glad that you mentioned it for yourself too. I think it's critically important. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love it. And I will say that a lot of leaders, to your point, Nina, are promoted into roles of leadership and they don't either understand the importance of their role. Because if you're in a leadership role, you're not only responsible for your own performance and your own development and your own everything, you're responsible for the lives of others. And to not understand consciously that whether you've got 2 people that are your direct reports or you've got 200 people that are in, direct and indirect, you are responsible for their development and their performance and for making sure that they're performing at their best. And that's, through great communication, setting the right expectations, providing feedback, holding accountable. And if you don't like that part of your job, you're not going to be a great leader.
That's powerful. I think a lot of people need to ask that question to themselves. Do I like being a leader? Do I want to be a leader?
One of the surprising things that I have experienced, and Nina and Mac, I'm not sure if you've seen this in your career, but I would say one of the most surprising things for me is when I am facilitating leadership development courses and a leader will opt out of being a leader after going through a couple of series because they don't want to do it. They wanted the power, the prestige, the title, the money. They wanted all of those things, but they didn't want the people. And if you don't want the people, you shouldn't be in the role. And maybe you don't feel confident in the people part yet, which is again why you should hire a coach and or pick up some leadership development courses in whatever way is available to you. You've got to figure out the people piece in order to be successful.
Right.
Well, I can't think of anything that you didn't ask me, but I do have something that I want to share with you. Nina, this goes to you because we have had a relationship and it's been a very long relationship. One of the things I loved about working with Nina, and especially when you came right out of college and I was providing you with some training and getting you ready for your role, is that you were so curious and so eager and so committed, like right away, that enthusiasm around wanting to learn and that curious learning and continuous learning piece. It was so critical and so important in that organization. And I just remember how you just took it all, you took it on and wanted to do as the best that you could right away. And you were always asking for feedback. How can I do this different? How can I do this better? And that's something that I remember about our relationship when we were working together. And I think that that's really important for people who are coming into organizations to find people who are curious, who are continuous learners, who want to do better. And what's tough is that some organizations just need people to fill a role and to have a job. And some organizations need somebody who are more in the latter, what I just described of you, Nina. I think most people would want somebody like you, Nina, and Mac, what I've heard about you. And that is that people who are ready to jump into doing something. But if you don't have that as a leader, how do you begin to cultivate that? And how do you model it? But that was something that you brought naturally. And so I wanted to say thanks.
She's
It was
still
really
like
wonderful.
that.
You're welcome.
No, it's been wonderful getting to know you better, and I hope we stay in touch.
We will stay in touch. It's been wonderful meeting you today. Really appreciate it. Nina, thank you so much again for the invitation. This has been a lot of fun. You too. Okay. Sounds good. Take care, okay?